NieR Automata is the fifth game in the NieR/Drakengard series. It was released in 2017 and it's a continuation from 2010's NieR, albeit it's not exactly a direct continuation. For Japan, NieR was sort of a split game, with one being Replicant and the other being Gestalt, while the West got Gestalt and called it only NieR. For some reason, in the 2000s, we in the West couldn't stand the idea of a big macho man not being our playable character, I guess. The father of the series, Yoko Taro, and producer Yosuke Saito both agreed on creating a sequel following NieR's release. 4 years later, production began with PlatinumGames heading the project and concluded with its release in 2017. Before I begin talking about the game, I want to preface by saying I personally haven't played the past games in the series, so Automata is the only one I have to go off of really. But I will say I looked into each of the games before playing Automata some time ago, so I have a decent understanding of the prior events. Either way, I want this to solely be about Automata, and I'll definitely cover the rest of the series soon someday. Then who knows, maybe I'll combine them to make a 10-hour video since this will probably be way too long. Nonetheless, one thing I noticed that carries over from game to game, and especially from Replicant to Automata, is the tone. The best way I can put it is that it's despairing. And before I get ahead of myself, I want to start from the beginning of the story and use the events that unfold to reinforce this notion. But I also want to show how the story makes an effort to show the opposite. So let's start with Chapter 1, the Prologue.
Everything that lives is designed to end. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death. Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment? I often think about the god who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle, and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
This introduction may seem interesting to some and just whatever to others. I mean, this is Square Enix. I'd understand if people thought we literally fight God. But as our unknown narrator mentioned, the struggle of life is a prominent theme that would become more apparent as we go on. So, you've been thrown into the fray of an aerial descent on an abandoned factory. Your mission is to take out a certain Goliath-class enemy. This descent all feels very surreal in how your comrades are killed off quite easily by this unknown laser out of view. The manner of how they die seems kind of odd at first, since these aircrafts are pretty agile, but I think we can assume that they can't predict when this laser will shoot. Either way, they are picked off one by one until you're the only one left. One thing this descent section shows is how seemingly unfazed our character 2B is at the deaths of her own comrades. It also shows the uncertainty of your own survival after seeing how easily they were picked off. And compared to 6-0, the operator you have contact with, she seems a bit more taken aback by this, while 2B calmly tells her how the operation is compromised. You're told to land and meet with someone named NieR.
Alert. Heavy damage and new toxic
After crashing through a wall and destroying your flight unit, you can now see your character for the first time. That is, if you closed your eyes when you bought the game. You're then ambushed by a group of hostile machines and a giant buzzsaw, who you can assume is probably the enemy.
Better make sure he's actually dead next time. That was dangerous, man.
NieR bails you out by destroying the buzzsaw with missiles from his flight unit. You then talk a little bit, and you devise a plan to find the actual target Goliath. As you make your way through the factory, you get a little bit of insight into both of the characters, and how NieR is this more innocent and somewhat joyous character who's glad to finally have a partner in the field. While, on the other hand, you have 2B who tells him that emotions are prohibited, showing her somewhat cold and aloof nature. Later you learn that humans used this factory before machines came and took over. but the way Nina speaks about it makes it seem as though they're separate from humans. But also, there is the fact that they refer to each other as units, and they also lack conventional names, which makes it apparent that they're probably not human. During this, Nina informs you that there's no meaning to what machines do after hearing a voice on an intercom that sounds like a human. And this begs the question of whether Nina is being dismissive of the intentions of machines. For machines to access something like that, for seemingly no reason at all, while all we know them to do so far is fight, is kind of strange. You get a little bit of extra characterization through 2B's dynamic with her pod. She shows a little bit of snark in how she believes herself to be capable without her pod's input, since it often states the obvious in many of these combat situations. Upon making it outside of the factory, you get a glimpse of the world beyond it, which shows hollow-looking buildings with overgrown foliage appearing to take over them. All of this goes to show that we are indeed in a post-apocalyptic setting. As you continue though, you're interrupted by 9S, who believes that Command got the wrong location, and that the Goliath is across the bridge at the other factory. 2B wonders about that as she walks along the bridge, and then she's suddenly attacked by 2 buzzsaws that eventually form into the target Goliath. During the fight though, 9S accompanies you but eventually gets hit by the Goliath while knocking it offline for a moment. After making your way to the top of the Goliath, 2B acts a bit out of character when she sees his damaged body. Compared to how she reacted at the deaths of her comrades in the descent, she is far more worried about 9S's life, even to the point where she yells at her pod to help save him. Instead, 9S reminds her of who they are, that being soldiers who pride themselves on their service. This seems to snap her back as 9S gives her control to his flight unit. After getting back to the fight, an odd occurrence happens with the Goliath. It's speaking. This beckons the question of what else the machines are capable of, since at this point they're still quite a mystery. Either way though, you still destroy the machine, which sends 2B landing on top of it, near 9S. Then, when you think you're in the clear, 3 more Goliaths appear. And since 2B just barely handled the first one by herself, it's likely she won't be able to take out the other 3. That's when 2B and 9S both take out what's known as their black box and request to detonate it so that they would take out the Goliaths. 2B's facial expression makes it seem like she begrudges this idea, which is understandable since this looks to be a last resort. They gladly bask in the opportunity to serve their cause alongside each other as they detonate their black boxes.
The honor was mine.
And that's it. Well, apparently not, since we cut to a shot of outer space panning out to show 2B alive and well, and later 9S too. This area you're in is the bunker. It's sort of this hub that houses many bodies of the Yorha units so that they can upload their data to the bunker in case of destruction. This is what 9S did for 2B, but he only got a part of his own memory uploaded. This is a nice little bit of contextualization for restarting and dying, showing that we are playing as the same character, but just in a new body. It also allows you to retrieve things like items, chips, money from your dead husk. This sounds pretty dark, and I think that's the point. Every time you die, you lose your physical possessions, but for 2B, she just lost her physical self. I mean, maybe they're fine with it since they're androids. Who knows? One thing that's noticeable immediately is the monochromatic color scheme all throughout the bunker. It homogenizes the Yorha in a way that presents them as uniform. This is supported by their character designs as well. If you look at the operators and many of the other units, none of them are really unique. This conveys the idea that this bunker is solely created for their cause and nothing else. For the androids, their only chance to understand their own interests beyond their cause is when they're on Earth, which is still their battlefield. And the operators are shown to have it the worst because they're stuck in the bunker and don't get the opportunity to go down to Earth. Because of this, every operator, including yours, are incredibly interested in the little things on Earth, like animals, weather, and foliage. Now, you get all this insight from talking to the other Yorha units all around the bunker. Through talking to them, you get a sense that they're very much like humans in the way that they have their own personalities and opinions on various things like workload, for example. Before I get ahead of myself though, if we go back to the scene with 2B and 9S, there's a strange shot at the end that shows 2B clenching her fist after 9S walks away. So far, 2B doesn't hold any animosity towards 9S, or openly at least. So what could this mean? Again, something for later. Also, we're introduced to a catchphrase, "Glory to mankind." This will be said quite often. Cutting away, we get a bit of an exposition dump through an unknown speaker addressing other Yorha on events that took place before the current story. What's told is that in 5012 AD, aliens attacked the Earth with machine life forms and almost wiped out all of humanity. The rest of humanity fled to the moon and operated from there. That's when in 5204 AD, they sent androids to push them back. All attempts failed and eventually the Yorha were created. Now, the speaker levies a lot of weight onto them by saying they're humanity's ultimate weapon and that they must end this war. While being just an exposition dump, and one that seems a little odd in how it's shown to the commander who should probably already know all this, it cements the importance of Yorha and their efforts in recovering Earth for humanity. You then awake to 9S teaching you how to use the settings. It's treated as a system maintenance for 2B, so a little bit of a nice contextualization again. One thing that stands out is the self-destruct option though. The fact that there's even an option to do that shows that they were designed to use literally anything to destroy the enemy, including their own lives. It's pretty sad since you see Yorha androids have their own sense of self and exhibit human emotions, even if some of them act like they don't. Since you have the option to self-destruct now if you want, when you do, you might notice the explosion is kind of small compared to the black box explosion. But I think this can be explained fairly quickly in that the black box explosion that we saw before was 2 Yorha androids taking out their black boxes, and whereas the one that we used to self-destruct by ourselves is inside our bodies, therefore being more contained. Also, 2B9S had to request permission to do so with their black boxes, since it probably causes a lot of damage to the area when they do so. It's said that the black boxes are essentially the Yorha units' core or their heart, but they can also be used as a bomb. Now, after maintenance, you go to talk to the commander who orders you to go back to the surface to rendezvous with Resistance. She also mentions how they've been unable to contact their Resistance contact as well, and as you head down to Earth on your flight units, 9S questions why a combat model like 2B has to accompany a scanner model like him on a recon job. 2B again is dismissive to it and amounts it to just being an order. This back and forth of 2B's character and how she's emotional one moment and dismissive the next makes it seem like she's undergoing some type of conflict or she's hiding some side of her. You land on top of a building a little bit away from the Resistance camp. You now get a better look at the city, which shows that nature has taken over, while buildings and other structures are more decrepit than they seemed at first. The only thing you can hear during this is, of course, the background track, but also the wind blowing, showing how empty this place has become now that it is devoid of humans. The City Ruins track reinforces this emptiness and how spaced out each instrument is and how separate they feel from each other. Along the way to the Resistance camp, you notice how the machines are not hostile, and Ninus makes note of how strange this is. And in a weird way, this kind of reminds me a little of Undertale and how it's a deconstruction of traditional RPGs. It makes you realize that there's no point in killing these enemies, and NieR Automata kind of does the same thing here. You don't need to fight these machines. It makes you take a step back and question why you're killing these machines since they don't want to fight. In RPGs, these enemies are viewed as a source of income or experience, but here there's more behind these enemies. As you explore the city ruins, there are access points that serve as your link to the bunker where you can get map information from satellites, you can send your save data to them, and you can check your email for spam from a fake Amazon email that tries to steal your information. Okay, maybe not that last part, but you have an email. Also, this is where you respawn when you die. Speaking of dying, when you die you get to leave a message behind with your last body. This ties into an online feature and how you can find other players as dead bodies and see their own personal messages. This isn't really that important, and I doubt I'll be mentioning this much, but at the end there is something that I'll mention. Eventually though, you make it to the Resistance camp, which is filled with a bunch of non-Yorha androids, and you meet their leader named Anemone, who gives you a bit of an odd reaction upon seeing 2B. From here on, you can learn more about the Resistance members and take on quests from them. The two for now are the Weapon Trader and the Supply Trader. Their quests are pretty simple fetch quests, but it's the bit of dialogue after each quest which is notable. The Weapon Trader thanks you, but ponders on the idea of these weapons rushing his comrades to their death instead of protecting them. Maybe 2B or Ninus would have a response to this, but they don't. This is the first of many looks into 2B, 9S, or rather, just all androids' view on war. That being their feelings of uncertainty in whether what they're doing is right. Next, there's the Supply Trader, who says he can't leave to find parts because of his leg. Well, it turns out his left leg is indeed busted up, but it's his fully original one. To him, replacing it would make him feel like he's become someone else. In a way, this last bit of his original self keeps him intact. One could argue he would be the same anyways, since he would keep his memory data. But as we'll see, it's the little things these androids and machines cling on to that makes them who they are. It's no different from how we humans have our interests and our superstitions, and again, neither 2B nor 9S has a response. It's possible it's something they've considered as well, since they no longer have an original body, as seen in the prologue. So now, after doing those two quests, Anemone will send you to the desert to dispatch some dangerous machines. But before you do, you can go to the bunker for a quest involving 11B, one of the androids who died in the aerial descent. This comes from 16D, who was a subordinate in her squad and looked up to her. You're asked to find her body and recover what you can. The location you're pointed to is the abandoned factory. After making your way to the very start of the factory, you find her body. Next to her is a data log containing her escape plan, showing she was planning to desert Yorha. She wanted to use her own destruction as a guise, but in reality it proved to be fatal. This is already pretty troubling, since you're left to wonder why would someone desert Yorha. Returning to 16D, you can tell her the truth or withhold it. If you tell her the truth, she mocks 11B for this and says that 11B used to look down upon her for being a defense model. But if you withhold the log, she'll admit that the two of them were in a relationship, and now she'll convert to a combat model to avenge 11B. She gives you the same reward no matter the choice, which will be defensive items, and when you think about it, having her significant other abandon her like that would make her angry. Her reaction when you show her the log makes sense. No matter your choice, she becomes a combat model anyways. And well, to bring you down even more, her giving up on her defensive items shows the lack of regard she now has for her life. One thing you do learn though, is that Yorha models who even attempt to desert aren't given backups like 9S and 2B. We even see one of the squadron members, 4B, reappear later in the game. So now you can head to the desert. As you make your way through, you get a transmission of a speech from that same unknown speaker from the scene at the beginning with the commander. It's just a motivational speech to push the androids further in their cause, but as 9S points out, it feels stiff. It doesn't feel empowering, it's just more like he's laying out what the enemy did and why they're supposed to keep fighting. You then meet Jackass, the one who basically heads the desert camp area. She's pretty snarky, she's interested in explosives, and has a fascination with Yorha androids' bodies for some reason. She then detonates the blockade, which opens up the more vast side of the desert. While running throughout the desert, you take out groups of machines, but for some reason they can all speak. What's really troubling is what they say though. They say things like, "Kill me," "Scared," "Stay away," "Help me." 2B initially doesn't acknowledge it much, but when you make it to one of the further groups, she becomes distressed by this. 9S on the other hand seems quite ignorant and levies it up to them just spewing random words that don't mean anything. And like he says, do you think they even understand the concept of being scared? Even though this is something that has supposedly been happening recently, shouldn't a scanner like 9S care to understand why they do this? Still, they push forward and kill all the machines they were ordered to. One thing to note too is the machines' designs in the desert. They wear masks and garments that humans wore in the past. Another instance of machines adopting an element of humanity. After taking out all the machines, there's one last machine who you follow all the way into a housing complex. The machines here are no different from the ones just before in that they exhibit human speech and fashion the same look as the other desert machines. The way they keep repeating the same thing really makes you feel uncomfortable when you kill them. While chasing after the machine, you get the sense of how maybe they're harmless, and you're just hunting them for the sole reason of them being a machine. The way they say they don't give up, run, makes it feel as though they know they're being hunted. Right before that, you come across a bunch of dead androids who seem to have been killed by the machines and dragged to the spot. Past it is a pit of machines who ignore you and act like humans. There are one swaying cradles like their mothers, and pairs who are, let's say, wrestling. If you don't attack them, a machine will drop down and rally the others to start attacking you. The way the machine says, "I'll get you for this," gives the impression that we've done something wrong to them personally, like they're just enacting revenge now. As you fight, others without masks and garments will jump down and start saying, "This cannot continue," while holding their heads like they're going insane. They then form what looks like a cocoon out of their own bodies, and then out plops a machine that resembles a human. What I think is happening here is the machines are interested in the human form that androids take, so they wanted to create a machine that gets the same advantages they would have. This also explains why they're saying this cannot continue, because their own forms are too weak, and for a species to progress, they would need to evolve. So you begin to fight this naked baby, I guess, and he starts to learn more about combat and begins developing its own techniques as you keep fighting him. As soon as you defeat him, you think you've killed him, but out of the wounds comes another machine with the same appearance. It screams at you, causing the area to shake. These two machines may look the same, but they differ greatly in terms of personality. The first one questions things like a child would, but as they keep losing to 2B and 9S, that anger lays dormant until it takes form as the machine that comes out of his wounds. After escaping, you send the battle data to the bunker and head to the resistance camp to rest. That's another thing too. Androids don't need to rest, but something as small as that seems to be desirable to some like 9S. This reinforces that notion of androids and machines admiring humans and their customs. Now, since you're back at the resistance camp, one quick little connection to a past game, and also a bit of world building I guess, is the android Accord. She's from Drakengard 3, but somehow she supplies the weapon trader in the resistance camp. Also, her name shows up on a flyer that seems to be for her weapon business. She never shows up in the game, but it's pretty interesting how she connects the two games. After you report to Anemone, she gives you a room to rest in for your reward. After leaving the resistance camp, you get a message from the commander that says some Yorhai androids have lost contact with the bunker, but they seem to be alive somewhere. This then leads you to the amusement park. After making your way through the murky sewers, you end up in a clearing. Proceeding forward, you're immediately hit with confusion at what's here in this amusement park. You stand in awe as there are many machines dancing around happily and shooting off fireworks in the distance. Along the way, some may give you presents as a way to spread their love. As you may have noticed, there's a huge hole in the castle that looks like a heart. I think there are two ways you can interpret what this symbolizes. The loss of humans has caused this place to lose its heart, or the joy that was once spread throughout it by humans. Although, I like to see it as this location is the heart of this world. In a way, you have machines that exhibit the same joy humans exhibited, albeit we don't know yet to what extent these emotions are manufactured or not, but still, they are a fine replacement for humans in that they make this place feel fun. As you pass through a corridor and make your way to an open area, a tank rolls in. Now, 9S will encourage you to destroy it, showing how ignorant he is to the fact that they're just harmless. I mean, all they're doing is shooting balloons. Now, if you do kill it though, you get an introduction to what machine cores are, and it's stated that they're similar to plant cells. Now, after the tank, you hop on a roller coaster and you kill some machines along the way. But on this ride though, 9S brings up how he's typically called Nines by other androids he's close to, and he asks 2B if she would like to refer to him as the same name. 2B is oddly cold to this proposal, saying, "I'm good." This shows how unwilling 2B is to call him by this name, but also it's especially odd given how much she cares for him, as we saw in the prologue. But this also shows how unconventional 9S is, in that he doesn't really care for his given name. He prefers a more human-like name, albeit I don't know if I've ever met anyone named Nines, but it's more human-like than 9S. You then hop off the roller coaster and land where the signal is coming from. Your only way forward is to jump down. You find yourself in a theater as the curtains part to show a machine with android bodies outfitted on her body like they're accessories. Her appearance isn't the only thing that's unsettling. During the fight, she laughs hysterically and screams quite a lot. It all feels very twisted in how she's set this up as a performance of sorts, since the lights shine on her as she initiates the battle. She says things like, "I must be beautiful," which makes sense since she has the most distinct look out of all the machines so far, besides the two in the desert. After a bit of fighting, it gets way more strange. When she sends androids, she's turned into weapons to fight you. They've been put on crosses and stripped of their skin like the ones on her own body. This could be looked at as she's crucifying them for their beauty and how they resemble humans. And that's backed up by her look and how she's trying to resemble a human, and specifically an opera singer.
Pod!
Affirmative.
Go!
After taking the androids out and barely defeating her, you get a little image of her holding her hand out to a machine in a hat. It then makes you wonder what would cause her to develop such a fascination with beauty, and does it have something to do with this machine in the hat? You then find out that the androids she used in the fight are unfortunately already gone. And after leaving, NieR mentions how it was almost like the machine, who we find out to be named Simone, had emotions. 2B cuts him off though and reminds him of how he told her that machines can't feel such things like in the desert. But just like how 2B reacted in the desert, NieR is having a similar moment as well, showing they're both clearly conflicted with the fact that machines are capable of more things than they thought. But also, the fact that both of them are questioning this shows how they're at least not morally bankrupt. From their perspective, they were killing beings that they thought weren't capable of the same things they're capable of. In a strange way, it kind of makes me think of how we treat animals we eat. I'm not saying to go vegan or anything, you can do what you want of course. I'm just posing the idea of how it's kinda similar, since what would happen if animals could talk and it turned out they understood similar concepts as us. But after that exchange, you meet a machine outside of the theater who wants to take you to its village as repayment for taking out Simone. Upon entering the village, you see a whole community of machines. They're all waving white flags to show they're peaceful. You then talk to Pascal, the head of the village, and he's very sensible in how he persuades you not to fight since they have no reason to fight either. NieR is still quite hesitant, but as you keep talking it turns out they've been working with the resistance with things like fuel supply. Now, you may be wondering how there are so many peaceful machines at this point. Well, as you learn from Pascal and the others through their quests, they've all disconnected from the network they all used to be a part of. It was created by the aliens so that they could issue orders to them through the network and have them all operate like a hive mind. But somehow these machines have been able to disconnect themselves from the network, and they've been able to develop their own personalities like Pascal and many of the others. This is the true turning point of the game, in which that idea of machines being the enemy has now become very hazy and questionable in itself. Around this point onward is where a whole bunch of quests unlock, and so I'll be splitting them up so I don't overload you with quests all at once. Plus, it just flows better. First though, you have to take a fuel filter to Anemone as a way for Pascal to gain your trust. On the way back, there's an interesting interaction with 6-0 that continues from one of her last interactions. She mentioned before about fortune telling and how it didn't work out since she didn't like the answers she got. And from what we know about her so far, she's pretty happy-go-lucky and likes to ask 2B things like the weather even though it doesn't pertain to anything like the mission. But this time, she acts differently. She tells 2B how she confessed her feelings to a fellow operator but was rejected. She tells 2B how she can't take life in the bunker anymore and she doesn't know how she can continue living. It may seem like a melodramatic rejection you'd see in some TV show which they eventually just get over or something, but the tone in her voice is very serious. It gives more insight into the operators and how they feel like they're trapped within the bunker. 2B responds telling her that if she were to abandon her duties, it would affect the mission. This brings 6-0's spirit back up because she just needed to know someone needed her. And you get the sense that this is what 2B intended. I mean, we see her hide her emotions quite often, and we also see them explode like in the prologue with 9S. Plus, the way she responds is very hesitant after 6-0 is shocked by what 2B said. It's like she realized that it was kind of out of character for her in the eyes of 6-0. Either way, as much as 2B tries to uphold that notion of emotions are prohibited, even she slips up. After making it back to the resistance camp and giving the fuel filter to Anemone, you head back to the village. Pascal calls in between and tries to let you know that they are indeed friendly. NieR accepts this, but says they don't have hearts. Now, this poses an interesting debate at this point because, what constitutes as a heart? I don't think 9S means a physical heart since androids don't have them either. So instead he must mean, the Kingdom Hearts heart. basically a soul. Pascal and these machines all have their own sense of self and their own personalities. They've disconnected from the network and they've adopted specific elements of humanity to form who they are. And I mean, yes, the androids themselves do exhibit qualities of humanity a bit more, it seems, like in their physical appearance and things they enjoy. Take that Yorha android in the Resistance camp who enjoys music, for example. Meanwhile, there are machines that do the same though, like Simone wanted to be physically beautiful. And I point this all out because 9S is choosing to be ignorant of this side of machines, while he himself should acknowledge this due to how observant scanner models are. Choosing to ignore the truth ties into their designs as well, which I've been holding off on mentioning and I'll get more into it at the end. But I will say that their blindfold is meant to show how they choose to look away from the truth, and in 9S's case, it's the human side of machines. Either way, one can argue these machines do have a heart, or rather, what we know as a soul. Before talking to Pascal, I want to point out Jean-Paul and his quest. Jean-Paul resembles the machine seen in that picture as Simone died, which it most likely is him since both their names come from two philosophers who were married. He's a pretty pompous guy who's interested in philosophy and tends to ramble a bit. Although he mentions something about existentialism in his little ramble, which is actually quite important. The topic of existentialism is one that will come up quite often in dealing with many of the characters of the game. But the fact that he is interested in philosophy and he can grasp these abstract concepts is interesting in how it broadens our understanding of what machines are capable of. You then have to go back and forth between his 3 followers and give him their gifts and then give them his cold messages, which they love to hear for some reason. After all is done, you go back to find out he's left the village to find himself. Perhaps he's trying to get at the root of his own existentialism. One of the funny things you'll find quite often in the dialogue between 2B and 9S is when they reflect on something they experience and ask if this is something humans did. It provides a bit of comic relief since, in this case, we all know humans to be fans of celebrities and such. But it also shows how 2B and 9S are acknowledging how human these machines are. After that though, near the edge of the village there is a bit of a family squabble that ends with the child running off. When we find him, we learn that the squabble wasn't that deep. He just left because of some petty argument he had with his mom. But the most important bit is how his mother says that it's been hard for them to understand each other since disconnecting from the network. For them, being a machine who's connected to a network where everyone understands each other doesn't leave room for them to act on their own will. It may be hard to understand each other's thoughts, but you get the impression that they would rather have this human-like life. Not a single machine wishes to join back with the network and subjugate themselves to this cycle of war. Returning to Pascal, what he wants the most is for androids and machines to live together peacefully. 9S is still quite adamant on the impossibility of this notion though. All of a sudden, a noise echoes off in the distance and 6-0 tells you it's a Goliath attack in the city ruins. How they got there so easily is unknown, but after finding the Goliaths and witnessing the center of the city ruins collapsing, it's revealed that the aliens were hiding underground this entire time. Before you investigate, you can do Jackass's research quest real quick. All it is really is her just giving you combat tests for her own research. But in this research, she finds some interesting tidbits as to how combat androids function. She also mentions how she's wondered why combat androids would be given an intellect when all they're meant to do is hack away. This brings up a good point as to why any of the Yorha have their own will and why they aren't programmed to do what they're told just like the machines when they're connected to the network. I mean, for one, they probably wouldn't have any androids that desert Yorha in that case. But Jackass does reveal that combat androids are programmed to derive pleasure out of combat apparently. Although, considering how 2B acts, it's hard to tell if that's the case since so far she's more of the type to do what she's told and be quiet. Back to the main story, you head to the crevice in the middle of the map and make your way underground. Past all these tunnels is a strange room that belongs to the aliens, or well, It used to be, at least. Those two human-like machines, now named Adam and Eve, show up. Oh, and this time they have pants on. A fight begins, and Adam informs you of what happened to the aliens and what their personal motivations are in a very calm way as you're fighting. This shows how Adam is the first one we fought due to how intelligent he already is. The biggest revelations here are that the aliens were wiped out by the machines centuries ago. Adam and Eve want the androids to bring them to the humans to dissect them in order to understand them. And then that machines have the capability to create their own sense of self and to evolve in some way as well. And I gloss over a bit of dialogue which foreshadowed this. It happened earlier on the bridge to Pascal's village, where 2B asks why the aliens haven't attacked the androids themselves in such a long time. Clearly you see why now. Now, the evolution part Adam mentions is interesting since they themselves are the prime example of machines evolving to surpass what the aliens were capable of. And now when you think about it, this proxy war has been going on all along while the side who started it has been entirely wiped out for quite some time. It begs the question, why do the rest of the machines fight the androids? Well, soon you find out that Adam and Eve have control over them so that they can fulfill their own ambitions. But was there a reason why they couldn't break from the network before Adam and Eve? Speaking of their ambition, it ties into that idea of how all machines and androids are fixated on what it means to be human. It's just Adam has a more twisted fascination with it. Well, of course, our characters don't agree with them on this plan, and so they disappear into the light as our characters try to stop them. Before you go to bunker though, Jackass reveals she has some history with the Yorha commander. At this point, I think we're to assume Jackass is that resistance contact Yorha couldn't get a hold of since she was in the desert when they tried to contact her. Plus, the fact that she knows the commander personally is quite telling since there isn't a single android beyond Yorha and her who mentions knowing the commander that closely. After reporting to the commander and heading back to Earth, there are some more quests that open up. One you get straight from the commander is called Yorha Betrayers. It's as it sounds. 3 Yorha androids stole from the resistance camp after deployment, and now you have to detain them. You chase 2 of them around a bit, and unfortunately, a fight ensues that doesn't allow you to detain them. Rather, you're forced to kill them. After 6-4B and 2-2B have been taken out, 8B arrives in disarray. This quest is beginning to feel all wrong, as you've killed 2 of her subordinates and you're about to kill her too. She says you don't understand anything, as 9S tries to convince her to let them take her in. This gives the sense that there must be some strong reason for them to leave Yorha. But nonetheless, you take out 8B as well. Talking to Anemone after this reveals that the Resistance hadn't had an incident where Yorha stole from them at all. Troubled by this, 9S contacts Operator 210 to see what's really going on here. All she says is that she doesn't have access to further knowledge on this matter as it came from the commander personally, and then that 9S should be careful. All of this is very worrying, and what's even more worrying is 2B's response to it all. She simply brushes it off and says, "We're here to fight." It's concerning that she wants to move past this, and I can't help but wonder if this need to move past these sorts of things like death comes from being desensitized to it. For 9S though, it was one thing to learn that machines may be capable of more than they let on to be after seeing things like that machine in the housing complex wanting to get revenge, but it's another thing to be forced into killing your own comrades and being told that the reason for killing them was all a lie, and then receiving no explanation after. But like 2B says, you're here to fight. And you know, that's a trend between the two. Something strange happens and one breaks character while the other snaps them back into ignoring it so they can fulfill their duties. It's all kind of sad how they feel like they're forced to suppress themselves like this. They may not be part of a network in the same way machines are, but they sure feel like they're conditioned to act like it. Since we're on a trend of showing how suspicious Command has been acting, let's talk about retrieving confidential intel. There's a Resistance member out in the city ruins who's missing plug-in chips that contain confidential intel, and so you help him find them. Along the way, you find out that these chips are actually from Yorha, and he shouldn't have these. Also, it turns out these belong to a specific unit that went missing recently. After returning the chips to him, you can go meet him and his family he mentioned in the housing complex. His family just so happens to be a Yorha android, a scanner at that. He always wanted a family after seeing how machines created their own familial units, and so you don't tell Command about them. It's interesting to see how androids envy machines in the same way machines envy humans. And now we see another case of an android deserting Yorha too. Although it's unclear if they're operating on their own consciousness, since it's possible the Resistance member messed with that. A little later, you get an email about that same missing android being found dead and next to a dead Resistance member as well. And I mean, come on. The writing is on the wall here. This scanner you just met is clearly the one in question. And just like the three in the last quest, he was ordered to be quote-unquote detained. Again, Command is beginning to slowly lose mine and probably your trust as well. Now, going back to Pascal, you get a bit more insight into his character. The one thing he fears the most is getting used to seeing other machines die. This parallels with 2B in that her demeanor gives the sense that she's seen death countless times and almost acts like she's gotten used to it. But this is more of a facade since we've seen her fear the deaths of others like 9S, and we've seen her care for other androids like 6O. But in general, this speaks to what war can do to people, or in our case, androids and machines. They can become scarred by the deaths of their comrades as well as grow to develop trauma. And I want to mention this feeling I've been having while playing this game. I like to envision there's this gap in between us, the player, and the machines. But it's through learning more about them, like with Pascal and how he just wants to live in peace. It's like that gap begins to slowly close as we start to connect with them more. Pascal then tells you about a forest kingdom you could investigate, and so you do. When entering the commercial facility which connects you to the kingdom, you're greeted by some machines you eventually take out. Well, all but one. You chase it down and it blows up to reveal Emil from the original NieR. After he rolls away, you enter the forest zone. All around the forest are machines training and chanting about fighting for their king, showing that loyalty is something machines can exhibit as well. The forest itself is peaceful and grand. Even though the machines live here, they haven't destroyed it like humans have in the past. They simply coexist with each other, undisturbed by the outside world, until now. You make it to the castle, but more and more machines keep appearing and saying things like, "Don't let them get to the king." It gives a similar feeling to when you were in the desert chasing after that one machine who didn't want to fight. In this case, it feels more like you're killing these machines for no reason, while all they're doing is protecting their kingdom from hostile intruders. Although, later on, there are a group of machines who talk about possibly attacking Pascal's village. So in a way, these machines also exhibit the side of humanity that seeks to conquer their own kind. It's through those machines that you see they have the capability to speak intelligently while instead opting to attack you. But I mean, the same can be said for 2B and 9S as well. As you make your way through the kingdom, slaughtering all the machines who wish to protect their king, 2B slips up when calling 9S's name. She calls him Nines, the same name he wanted her to call him. She tries to play it off, but again, she's clearly hiding her feelings from 9S for some reason. Entering the chamber, you find a baby machine in a cradle. But then, another Yorha android, A2, drops down and destroys it. A2 is a fugitive who you're told to destroy on sight. The odd thing though is that she doesn't attack you. Matter of fact, the game forces you to fight her if you sit there for a while. Even though she's said to kill pursuit androids, it's clear in her demeanor towards 2B and 9S that she doesn't want to fight. Also, the fact stands that she kills machines too. So if she's not on Yorha's side, or the machines, then whose side is she on? This is the point where the factions this story sets up to make you believe are true become muddled and enter this sort of gray area. A2 stops fighting you and 9S asks why she betrayed them. She leaves you with the haunting words of, "Command is the one that betrayed you." The hints that something dark is going on behind our backs with Yorha have all culminated to this one tangible point where our worries are now reinforced by this one line. A2 escapes and 9S contacts Bunker. He asks about A2, but the commander can't say why A2 deserted the force. You head to Pascal for answers on A2, and that ends in a dead end too. Upon heading back to the Resistance camp, 2B chastises 9S for asking Pascal about such sensitive things with regards to A2. But 9S doesn't act like it was a genuine mistake. He knew that, but still wanted to ask. I mean, can you blame him at this point? There have been so many strange instances where information is being withheld from him. He's desperate to understand what's going on around him, so his response is truly apologetic. But 2B didn't really mean it anyways. Rather, she uses it as a way to cheer him up as she admires it. It's times like this where 2B is more straightforward, which kind of catches you off guard. But of course, just like whenever she's revealed her feelings in the past, she always has to snap him back with something cold. Like in this case, machines are the enemy, don't forget it. Upon talking to Anemone, she has a mission for you which deals with guarding the Resistance while they transport missiles. This is the point at which everything is full steam ahead and there are little to no side quests after this. So before that, let's cover two that are really quick. Terminal repairs and finding a present are the ones in question. They're fairly simple and deal with taking out some machines at a terminal for 6-0. But after, she calls you and laments on how she understands it must be tough down there with fighting the machines and all, but she can't help but want to go down to the surface at some point. 2B doesn't really know how to reply, and so it's kinda awkward, and 6-0 regrets what she said in that moment, which, oh man, can I relate to both of them. Later you get another email from 6-0 thanking you and saying how she wishes she could have gone to the surface and done it herself. After reading that, 2B and Pod 042 have this mutual understanding that 042 has to speak aloud since 2B isn't good at conveying her feelings. Coming from a pod, it's kind of odd to think that it could catch on to something like 2B wanting to find a gift for 6-0. At this point, the pods are the only ones who don't really exhibit many human-like qualities. But as we'll see a little later, there's more to the pods than we initially thought. After you send 6-0 a picture of a flower, she calls you and you can tell just how ecstatic she is over this. Just seeing her so happy over something like this puts a smile on your face and truly makes you feel for her. But on the other hand, there's a tinge of sadness in the fact that she's been brought to the point where something as little as this fills her with joy. This is reinforced by the more melancholic song that plays behind this moment. But this is not to say that there isn't any joy to be found when looking at flowers. It's just something we're used to seeing in the real world and something we're used to seeing in the game as well. And compared to the operators, they're stuck in the bunker and they don't get to see any of it. And now that I'm on this, it makes you realize how we take the beauty of our world for granted. In Automata, we see how nature takes control after the humans have left, and you can't help but appreciate just how much it flourishes without us. Connecting this to another franchise, it reminds me of how Hiro Isono depicts nature as something that's majestic and gargantuan in contrast to the size of the other beings this world has created. Anyways, after your talk with 6-0, you head back to the city ruins to find that Emil now runs a shop in a cart-looking thing that drives around the map. But if you head to the center of the city ruins and down the sewer opening, you'll make it to the flooded city where our mission to guard the resistance takes place. On the way, NieR mentions how he wanted to get back so he can take a bath. Again, this is similar to the time NieR wanted to go back to rest even though their bodies don't need to. It's sort of like they're unconsciously taking after human activities to make themselves feel more human in a way. And like at the beginning with the supply trader, androids have a bit of an identity issue due to how replaceable their bodies are, but it's things like their memory data which keep them intact. That is, unless you're a non-Yorha android or a Yorha deserter. Well, after you take out the machines, the commander calls to tell you that the cargo ship that was headed for resupply is now under attack. You head out in flight units and fight off the machines until the cargo ship is picked up and destroyed by a massive machine that can stand on the ocean floor. It once made contact with the land and destroyed all androids and machines in the vicinity, but eventually went back to the ocean, as we're told by Pascal. Oh, and here we see 4B from 2B's aerial descent at the beginning. Everything the androids try on this machine seem to be ineffective, even getting to the point where all the androids but 2B and NieR are knocked out. NieR comes up with a plan and leaves, which causes Pod 042 to suggest 2B reports him for desertion, which then causes 2B to lash out at 042. Kinda similar to how 2B had that outburst with 042 at the beginning when NieR got injured. NieR then shows up with a large missile and launches it into its mouth, destroying the machine. The explosion it generates is so big that it sends all or most androids back to the mainland and wipes out all of the camera signals. Now, we get a shot of the commander hoping to herself that 2B and NieR don't die. This may feel like nothing in the moment, but considering that feeling that something is going on behind our backs with command, it's strange to see her whisper this to herself. This shows that the commander genuinely cares for 2B and NieR, and that maybe there's something or someone else above her that's pulling the strings. Back to 2B, every other android in the area has been taken out or they're somewhat conscious. But NieR isn't anywhere to be found nearby, so you go search for him. You have to get a dynamic scanner to find faint black box signals which Devila and Popola, two androids from the original NieR, have. But it's apparent later on that they aren't the same Devila and Popola from the game. You're eventually led to the caved-in part of the ruins, and even all the way into the cave. It's quite odd to think NieR would get this far by himself and why he would be here in the first place. Pod 042 believes an ambush may be up ahead, but again, we see 2B throwing all caution to the wind for NieR. Going down the elevator brings you to a place known as the Copied City. Everything is bright white, like a sketch someone created. It lacks color, showing its lack of life. The only thing beyond the buildings are dead androids scattered about. The one who created this copied city was none other than Adam. You meet him at the end of the path and a fight ensues, although the fight doesn't even start as a fight at all. He simply wants to tell you why he created this city. He reiterates the things that have been hinted at throughout the game, things like machines having this instinctual interest in humanity and hence why they adopt specific aspects. Where Adam aligns, though, is in the way of conflict. He was brought to this mindset through seeing how they killed, stole, and hurt each other, And like he said before, this makes humans an enigma to him and how he can't understand how other species would do that to their own kind. It's because of that difference that causes him to believe that conflict is the core of humanity. And just like all other machines, he will adopt it since he wants to understand what it means to be human. Beyond that, this is why you fight him. He has the intention of possibly dying here so he can understand another facet of humanity. This stems from how there's all this knowledge of humanity in their database, but there's nothing on what it feels like to die. And of course, there is no way to know without experiencing it. That's why it isn't there. It's pretty sad and twisted how Adam's fascination has grown to such an extent. But just as his need to understand all aspects of humanity is his drive to fight, he knows 2B needs one too. 9S. The theme of finding purpose in life becomes more apparent with Adam here, but also connects back to Jean-Paul's mentioning of existentialism. Even though Adam's purpose is quite negative in how it brings pain to others, he needed something to cling on to so that he would have a will to live. It's this aspect of humanity, the will to live, which is something all humans, androids, and machines need. It's also through Adam's antagonizing with kidnapping 9S that he brings out the anger in 2B and further reinforces his own notions of conflict.
Is this death?
Eventually, you kill Adam, and all he has to say is, "So dark, so cold." In the end, he finally got what he wanted, but it was at the cost of his own life. 2B then picks 9S up and takes him back to the resistance camp. Off-screen, 2B gets Anemone to send 9S to the bunker fully intact. But it's that mention of fully intact that's interesting. 2B could have easily had 9S's data sent to another body and had him come down to Earth faster instead of having him be repaired. The reason why she requests his current body be sent to the bunker is because it calls back to that idea of identity and if they're really the same person after transferring to a new body. That shot of 2B clenching her fist at the beginning begins to make more sense as we go on. Of course she never wanted to see 9S die, but it's also the fact that 9S lost a part of himself in the beginning, a memory he had with her that he'll never experience. I mean, compared to us, some of us may have awful memories, but Yorha androids could forget to upload their data to the bunker and be reset to a past version of themselves. Their chance to grow as a person is stunted by this. But in the simplest way, 2B is trying to treat 9S like a human. Like I said, the act is unnecessary for Yorha androids and 9S is incredibly injured. But the possibility of him not uploading his data before and transferring to a new body is something she doesn't want for him. And I could be getting ahead of myself, but there's a line at the end of this route that further reinforces this conflict 2B has with identity. And even while talking to the commander, 2B ignores the impact of her killing Adam and is far more worried about what they'll do to 9S. I'm sorry if I'm beating this point into the ground, but like I said, why would an android be worried about a comrade who's in this state when they have a backup? So again, it contributes to her wanting to preserve the 9S she's known up to this point. Either way, after talking to the commander, you find yourself at the abandoned factory meeting up with Pascal. After the events in the beginning, new machines have shown up in the factory to form a religious community of sorts. Pascal says the village has formed an alliance with them, so you're both here to learn more about these machines. As you go along, you pass by many machines reiterating similar phrases relating to their religion and how great it has been for them. At this point, it isn't entirely shocking to see machines being capable of understanding religion, but it is still interesting, and it just checks more boxes in the aspects of humanity column. But one thing of note is what religion means to us humans in general. Whether you believe in one or not, it does serve a purpose for some, and it gives meaning to them. It's something that could help mediate their way of life for better, so they have something to look forward to after life. But it could also be for worse, if it extends to them projecting their values onto others who don't fall in line with their faith. So we'll just have to see if this applies to machines as well. You and Pascal walk in to meet the leader of these machines and, well, his head falls off. This becomes a sign to the other machines that he has become a god through death. Because of this, they believe that they now can become gods through the same means. Where this teaching comes from, we don't know at this point. A little subtle touch in the framing of this scene is flipping the shots sideways and upside down to show how twisted things have become with these machines. Typically in movies, for example, it's used as a signifier for when things are about to change in a strange way, and this is no different. Anyways, you take out all the machines and/or escape through the elevator where you reach 9S, or the machine he hacked into at least. He's going to help you from the hacking side. And well, it's at this point where the weight of the game truly hits you. I mean, yeah, there was 9S's disappearance, which was very troubling, but at the same time, what you see throughout the rest of this factory may be the darkest point of the game. All throughout the factory are machines huddled over in fear for their lives after realizing they don't want to die for the sake of this religion. It's now become more apparent that this religion has shifted more towards a cult, and how it forces its doctrine on its members through other machines trying to kill the ones who wish to live. And while reading every single bit of dialogue in this place, I couldn't unscrunch my face from just how hard it was to read said dialogue. It gets even worse when, after you beat the boss of the factory, there's a group of machines lined up around a pool full of some sort of liquid metal, and they all jump in. And what's worse is that some of them still have the apprehension over whether this is right or not. Unfortunately, incidents like this have happened in our own world to some degree with humans. It's that real-world connection and the game's humanization of machines which causes this to be the darkest point of the game.
Why? Why did you have to die? It's not fair! My only brother.
After leaving the factory, it cuts to Eve at a table in some unknown location. He's seen lamenting over his brother's death, but it isn't long until that sorrow turns into anger. This sets up the final chapter of Route A and B quite well, albeit a little disconnected since we haven't seen much of Adam and Eve on their own, but that'll be remedied in Route B though. All of a sudden, you get an emergency transmission from the Resistance, so you head over there. Along the way, the amount of hostile machines keeps increasing, plus you can hardly take them on since they discharge electricity. Upon making it to the Resistance camp, you find that the Resistance is being eaten by zombie-like machines. After taking them out and going outside to fight a boss, it's revealed that Eve is the source of all these machines due to his overwhelming hatred for androids, or well, everything, as he'll say later. 9S also makes his return here, and after fighting Eve briefly, you then head to Pascal's village since they're being attacked too. This whole section feels very sporadic as you're going from area to area to fight and to protect all who you've met. It really encapsulates that feeling that this place is on the verge of destruction. And it's all because you took Eve's brother away. To Eve, his meaning in life was Adam, and now that he's gone, he sees everything else as meaningless. Eve represents that nagging thought in the minds of androids, machines, and us, which tries to convince us that everything we do is meaningless, whether that be in the grand scheme of this earth or just how we feel about our reasons for living. This is shown by how he tells 2B and 9S that he knows how they feel. He knows humans, and now they all search for some meaning in life like him. And so to him, the fact that his meaning was taken away now means everyone else's meaning should be taken away as well. And just like Adam, Eve isn't some evil character. Eve just looked to his big brother as someone he could depend on, someone who gave him meaning in this world. Matter of fact, Adam birthed Eve, as weird as it sounds. If you want to look at it from a simpler and more humanistic perspective, Adam and Eve are like two orphan brothers who were brought into this world and had to find their purpose all by themselves. They're two children brought into this world not to fight or to contribute to the war, but to be the start of something new for the machines. Remember that line those machines in the desert chanted before. This cannot continue. The machines in the housing complex were living peacefully until you attacked them just for being machines. So 2B and 9S are the ones who started this whole conflict with Adam and Eve. They assumed Adam was an enemy and perpetuated this cycle of war. All the while, Adam's first words were, "Androids, why fight?" Who's to say things would have turned out differently if they never fought Adam? Now Eve wants to simply destroy everything, and intentionally or not, destroy the cycle of war as well. One thing to note that's significant about how Adam and Eve fight is what they used to fight. Also, the way they dress at each final battle is important too. Adam is far more clothed than Eve, and he even wears glasses even though his eyesight should be fine since he's a machine. He fights with the same blocks used to forge the copied city. This all shows how hard he's trying to be considered human, or just to understand them. For Eve, he isn't shown to care about humanity all that much like Adam, but Adam is what he cares about most. At this point, we don't know why he wears pants, but it's probably because of Adam. And now Eve uses the scraps of his fellow machines in battle to show he doesn't even care about his own kind anymore. After a grueling fight of Adam crying and screaming at you for taking his brother away, 9S manages to take his object control away. Adam now kneels before 2B. He utters one last word. Eve is now dead, and 9S has become corrupted after hacking into Eve for too long. This is the point where 2B's conflict with her own identity becomes most apparent as she applies it to 9S again. It's conveyed outright here when she says that if 9S lets his old data go to the bunker, he would lose who he is in this moment. 9S understands, but he can't have this corrupted data go to the bunker, so he asks 2B to kill him. And then it comes full circle. It shows her clenching her fists just like when 9S lost a bit of his data in the prologue. Here she is, having to go through that again. Still, she strangles him to death. She starts crying as she holds him in her arms, saying, "It always ends like this." But not long after, the machines around the battlefield begin to send out signals and they begin to resonate with each other. All this culminates to one machine calling out to 2B. It's 9S. The fact that his data is able to be recompiled through the machine network after having been in it while hacking Eve is quite telling in how machines and androids aren't that different. In this final moment, machines have allowed an android to recomplete their data and thus gives hope for androids and machines coexisting. And with that, 9S holds 2B up as she reflects on how machines have grown so much so that there isn't much separating androids and machines now. 2B finally accepts this side of machines openly, and now that she finally acknowledges the truth, it haunts her as she realizes how much pain she's caused for them.